Well, last week, a delegation of Libyan rebels came to Washington seeking financial help from the U.S. government. They didn't get it. In that delegation was Ali Tarhouni, effectively the finance minister for the rebel government. Just 2 months ago, he was teaching microeconomics at the University of Washington, and he returned to his homeland after the uprising broke out. I spoke to him during his trip to D.C. and asked how someone with a Ph.D. in economics ends up a rebel.
I'm not sure we're forced to be a rebel. This is a revolution that started peacefully, and it's this thug, this killer Gaddafi regime that basically forced us to carry weapons to defend ourselves. There are a lot of young people basically there. There are teachers, there are professors, they come from all walks of life, but they all believe in one thing, that Gaddafi need to go.
I understand you had to leave Libya about 40 years ago. You were actually sentenced to death by Gaddafi, I'm told.
Correct.
So when you returned 40 years later as this economics professor and you look at what has been described as a disorganized rebellion that sort of sprouted up from the ground, how did you take control? How did you try to find financing for this group?
It's a very slow and it's a very difficult and challenging process. Libya is a very wealthy country. We have a lot of assets in Libya and overseas. We have funds that we know in excess of $165 billion, for example, that are frozen outside. Keep in mind that the sanctions that are imposed by the United Nations have no exemption for us. So we're faced with the same sanctions that are imposed on Gaddafi.
I'm told you had to rob the central bank in Benghazi in order to get cash. Is that right?
I'm not sure I want to be known for that, but war required desperate measures, and basically the vault had 3 keys and we only had 2 of them, and we had to find a way to get access to that. It turned out that there wasn't really much there. There's less than 600 million dinars, and that's basically a very small amount of money for our needs, not only in the liberated area, but it's very disheartening that the besieged, the killing, the misery that has taken place in places like Misrata, and I can't help them. And I want to convey that simple message to all of our friends that we are in a war, that actually people are dying. So my quest for liquidity is critical, and it's instant. I need all of these resources yesterday.
And you're in Washington right now. What are you asking of officials there?
We're not asking for a legal recognition. We're asking for a political recognition, similar to what France did. And the second one is find some mechanism where we can have access to some of these funds in the form of a line of credits or loans, any type of mechanism.
Have you talked in any way to oil companies or to producers who might be able to help you get those assets that Libya has to market?
I don't look at the oil industry now as a source of revenue. In the future, obviously, that's a valuable sector, not for us, but also for the international community.
But you haven't talked to any oil companies while you're in the United States about helping bring that to market, to bring in revenues to Libya?
Well, we don't really have a problem of bringing it to market. The oil that we have control over, we can produce ourselves, but that's less than about 100,000 barrels a day, and that's not enough to solve our problem. So we don't really need any oil help of any oil companies that help us produce the oil. And down the road, when Gaddafi goes, and I think it's a matter of weeks now, I think the transformation to a democratic, constitutional country will have its representative that will lead the country and discuss and plan sectors, among them the oil industry.
Tarhouni says the rebels need $3 billion in financing to fight for the next 6 months.